Hello, Grace. Welcome to GraceCast, our podcast here at Grace Presbyterian Church. If you've been listening to this podcast, I like to say it's for anybody of any age to listen to as we explore the Bible in a year. And my name's Kaylie Bodan. I'm our young adult and college minister here at Grace. And I have the opportunity to come on once a month with our young adults to talk about specific topics or questions that we have. So if you're listening today, today's that special day. I have an awesome young adult here with me, and we're going to be talking about 1 Kings, specifically focusing on the idea of wisdom. But before doing that, I'm going to have him go ahead and introduce himself. Tell us who you are, tell us your occupation, how you came to Grace, and then icebreaker question for you is, what's the best advice you've ever been given? Who gave that advice, and why did it mean so much to you?
All right. My name is Michael Aquari. I am an informatics pharmacist, so I work with Harris Health. Yeah.
Informatics pharmacist. I didn't know that was the official title.
Yeah, that's the official title, informatics pharmacist, which is just a fancy way of saying, like, I'm a pharmacist that works in the IT realm.
Nice. Okay.
Managing the software in hospitals at Harris Health.
Cool. And then how did you come to Grace?
Yeah, so I was kind of born into Grace.
Yeah, you and Daniel.
Yeah, my parents started coming here before I was born. So, just got baptized here, went through confirmation, and went away for college for a little bit, and then for residency as well, and then came back afterwards.
And you help out a lot in our children's ministry.
Yeah.
I hear that a lot. I always hear about Michael, our children's ministry. It's so fun.
Awesome.
Okay, question, because we're talking about wisdom today. So I had to do like an icebreaker question for you. Is what's the best advice you've ever been given?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd probably say the best advice I've been given is do it while you're young. And that's advice I got from my dad. And he would always do it in relation to like education. So growing up, they pushed, go to school, do this, get your higher education. And I'd always tell him, I don't want to go back and I ultimately did, but don't want to do, higher education. I was like, I'll do it later in life, even now, kind of pushing for masters. But that idea of like, do it while you're young. And I've kind of embodied that more so in my day to day, where it's like, just do it early. Those of you that know me know I like to get up super early in the morning at like 4 or 5.
You get up at 4 or 5 a.m.?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so it's that idea of like doing things super early in the day. And
getting a head start in a week.
Just get one of my biggest mottos is like, get it done before the sun comes up. So,
This is like such an off-topic question from what we're at, but like, how has that helped you with your relationship with God?
Yeah, it's those quiet moments, because at 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, it's so slow, it's so dead, nobody's around. If you go driving, the streets are empty. It's kind of perfect. It's kind of this pace of like slowness and stillness. So it kind of creates that environment where there's no distractions, there's just less people around. So
just you and God, and time to be together. That's
absolutely
cool. When I was thinking about this question, it was far less official of a question or serious of a question to think about. But I was thinking about how when I was in high school, I used to volunteer at this assisted living facility that my mom worked at. And I would go and I'd sit with those who are older and I'd ask them, what's your best advice? And one lady told me, like, if you're having a bad day, just sing a silly song. And I was like, okay. I've honestly used that. Like, you could ask my husband. I randomly sing some silly songs sometimes, and it's been great. Cool. But anyways, today we're going to be talking about an overview of 1st and 2nd Kings, basically where we're at in Scripture. If you guys have been reading along, you should be around I think it's the middle of 2nd Kings. I don't know the specific chapter, but you should be about finishing up the book of the Kings. And these 2 books are divided, but they're technically one unified story. And they go from the death of King David all the way to all of this stuff in between to then Israel being in exile. And so we leave off, David has united this kingdom through a ton of different rebellion, through a ton of different circumstances. This one kingdom ends up being united. And then we get Solomon and his rule, and that's the first half of Kings from chapters 1 to 11. We learn about Solomon and his wisdom and his rule and the building of the temple. And then the second half of First Kings talks a lot about then the divide between Israel. What was that like breaking point, that division where the tribes split up into Israel and Judah, the northern and southern. And then it talks about the different kings that then came along. And then after that, at the end, is kind of this talk about God sending prophets, trying to turn his kingdom back from idolatry, back from corruption to him. And then ultimately, Second Kings leads to then the exile. But today, what I wanted to kind of focus on was actually going back a little bit of what you guys have read a while ago, back to Solomon. And I want to ask a question of like, why wasn't the gift of wisdom? So like Solomon, he knew what was right. He knew what was wrong. Why wasn't that enough for him to be obedient? And so let's dive deeper into that by starting from the beginning. So in 1 Kings chapter 3, Solomon asked for wisdom to rule God's people. Well, to you, what does this reveal about Solomon's heart?
Yeah, I think the first thing that stood out to me is the fact that he's asking. You know, I think he says he's a little child.
Yes, yeah.
I don't know if he's truly a little child or if he's in his teenage years, early 20s, but the fact that he is able to recognize that I don't have all of the abilities that, you know, I need to successfully rule these people. I think he understands the significance of the task.
Yeah.
He understands his need to depend on God. So just that heart posture of dependence and asking for, you know, God's wisdom.
When I first read it, I had no idea he said that, like, I am a little child. And I thought about that and I was like, whoa, that does show like this dependence, right? A child needs to depend on their parent to teach them and to correct them and to provide for them. And you see this kind of humble young heart in the beginning with that. And I thought that was so cool. So then in the beginning, like, how did we see Solomon use his wisdom well in the earlier chapters?
Yeah, there's a story about the two women with the baby.
Yeah.
And they bring this case to Solomon. And I think that's maybe one of the first areas where we see him execute his wisdom. So the story is that one woman has, I believe, killed her baby accidentally and has essentially taken another woman's baby. So they bring the case to Solomon and say, Solomon is trying to figure out whose baby it really is.
Right.
So he just says, hey, take the baby, split the baby in half, and you take one half.
Yeah.
And then the other person takes the other half. And in that way, the true mom kind of cries out and says, hey, give the whole baby to this lady so the baby can live.
Yeah.
And just his ability to kind of come up with that scenario is very unique.
Yeah. This is also off question, but like, what do you think that wisdom kind of pointed to in that, like, what in that woman did it kind of reveal out of that circumstance? Yeah,
I think, that's a tough question.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
tough one.
You stumped me there.
I kind of started thinking about it. I was like, what was Solomon kind of looking for with that, with like that scenario and stuff? And the only thing I could kind of think about is like the heart of the woman, right? Like, I think when we think about like wisdom, we only think about the mind.
Yeah.
And rather than like with this scenario and this question, it kind of pointed to the woman's heart. The one who was like, hey, I don't want to like have my baby die. I would rather another woman take her. Basically was like ultimately the end of that realization and stuff points to that love and heart over her child that then kind of pointed to the truth behind the case and the scenario and the wisdom and stuff. So we see this kind of like cool part of Solomon's wisdom that was used, but then where do we see kind of Solomon start slipping through the cracks with God?
Yeah, I think it's in chapter 10. That's where we start to see he's accumulating all this wealth, all these possessions. Yeah. It talks about year after year, all these people from the different areas bring him more and more gifts.
Yeah.
So I think to me, that was kind of the beginning of, you know, he's starting to lose focus a little bit. He's starting to focus on the material things, the different possessions. And then, of course, naturally, he's becoming more and more famous.
Yeah.
People are coming from all over trying to,
His temples being filled, or palaces being filled with gold and wealth and all these different things. Yeah.
So people are coming, seeing the extravagance. And then, of course, he's kind of getting caught up with all the women, his wives, the concubines, all of that.
All of that. So my now question that we're going to sit on for a second is how? Like, how did somebody who was given the gift of wisdom to discern what was right and wrong for his people and to rule his people, how did this not translate into then being obedient to God? How did somebody who knew what was right and wrong then go and commit adultery, press taxes on his people, harsh taxes, oppress them, kind of get filled with the awe of being recognized and success? How did this happen?
Yeah, to me, it's kind of like one thing to know the right thing to do, but then it's another thing to go and execute and actually do that thing. Yeah. Right. The Bible talks about how even the devil and his demons kind of know the word of God, right? So they know these things, but do they actually go and do it? Yeah. No. So I think in a similar way, Solomon is kind of executing his own will, even though he knows what he should be doing. He's not really submitting to the will of God. I think once upon a time he was. If you look at the prayer he prayed when he's dedicating the temple to God, he kind of has this heart that says, God, like, help us not to stray. And even when we stray, forgive us, right? So it's like this completely different posture compared to what we see later.
I think I was looking it up because then I was like, okay, so what is wisdom? Like kind of thing and stuff. So I'm a logical thinker. I was like, how could somebody who knows like that's the right answer and that's a wrong answer, like choose to do that? And I found something from like Tim Keller where it talks about like wisdom isn't just like for deep thinkers. Like it's not just for you to have knowledge and to think about the most philosophical thing and leave it there. He says it's how we get through daily life. It's what governs our choices we make and motivates us. But that wisdom isn't just knowing things, but it's also the heart behind things. And so with that, like with Solomon, the how is just like, I think through compromise and through things like his heart slowly disaligned with God. He may have knew the right thing to do, but like he wasn't acting out of a heart that was aligned with God, right? And you kind of see that grow. So with that, like, it's not just Solomon. Like we see this with, there's so many different kings in the Book of Kings, and it kind of talks about there are different kings, and it uses a phrase of either like they did what the one that before them did, or they did what their father did, or some of them say they did what David did. And some of these kings, majority of these kings did evil. They built shrines, they did idolatry. They worshipped other idols. They built up a kingdom for themselves. They murdered others. They just terrible, evil things. How, like, with that, as you go through Kings, as people are reading through the Book of Kings, how do their stories point to this need for a better king?
Yeah, looking at the Kings, it's kind of the cycle of straying from God, disobedience, oppressing others, idol worship. I think in their day, it was kind of like this worshiping a different God, where today for us, it might look like devoting our attention or delighting in something that's not God, right? Putting other things, maybe our work or other things in our lives above God. I think it's just forgetting what the question was.
Oh, how do their stories point to the need for the better king?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just the need for just like a dependence on God. Yeah. And if looking at the story, it's like the kingdoms were divided. Yeah. Right. And then ultimately the story will eventually point to Jesus, where we have a unified kingdom. And I think it's kind of the same thing where when we stray from God, we have a divided heart. Right. So it's kind of, growing closer to God so that our heart is more unified towards him.
Yeah. And ultimately, like, no human king was able to do that perfectly, right? Like, well, okay, human king, like, not talking about Jesus yet.
I get you. I get you.
But, like, David, even this guy after, this king after God's own heart, like, wasn't able to do that perfectly. At times he had a heart that was divided from God. And then we see human kings that ruled in evil and wicked hearts obviously were divided from God. And so, like, we needed a king whose heart was just fully aligned with God. And, like, that could only be God himself, right? A king that was going to rule in that way couldn't be just human. Couldn't come from human nature, couldn't come from a human heart. We needed God himself. I think that's been cool to kind of keep reading through the kings and just seeing the ways that Jesus was that king, that Jesus was God himself and aligned himself with the Father and with the Spirit. And he actually prayed for us as a church to not divide ourselves from each other and divide ourselves from God, but he prayed that we would be unified in one as he is with the Father and with the Spirit. So with that, as we get into like talking about wisdom and maybe how that can apply to our life and our day to day, how does the heart play a bigger role in faithfulness than simply just knowing what is right and what is wrong?
Yeah, I think so. That word heart in the Bible talks about, our innermost thoughts and desires, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like understanding, like you said, our human nature, we're kind of born with this human nature that and this flesh that opposes God. So it's kind of like knowing that, how do we every day kind of purify our hearts, renew our minds, so that we are walking in line with the things of God.
Yeah.
Right.
And then how can we be like Solomon in the beginning, right? Like he saying like, God, we're little children and stuff, and like growing that heart and then growing that wisdom through humility.
Yeah.
Looking at that. That's like the hardest part is like that I found in my life is looking at something and saying, I don't know. But like we need that in life. We're going to have circumstances that don't come from like, there's a rule book on this or an exact to-do step-by-step guide. There's not a step-by-step guide on losing a job. There's not a step-by-step guide on like then finding a job or getting married. I think we talked about that like a while ago with our young adults, right?
Yeah.
We wish there was a step-by-step guide with dating. Like there's not. And that's where wisdom comes into play.
Exactly.
But like if we don't have a humble heart with God, aligned with God, just knowing what's right and what's wrong doesn't mean that we're actually going to walk in that.
It's a lot of that gray area where it's kind of like both options aren't necessarily bad, but it's just like, which one do you choose?
Yeah. I read like the Tim Keller quote, and it was like, what was it? It was like basically you shouldn't worry so much about the decision you make being right or wrong. What's the biggest danger is making a decision without being aligned with God. That's what you should worry about. And I was like, oh, that's like, I don't know if I like, I don't know. Sometimes I've been in circumstances where I'm like, God, am I making the right decision? Is this the right decision? Is this wrong? And like, I remembered in times where people have humbled me and said like, Kaylie, like God won't let you make a wrong decision. Just align yourself with him. Yeah. And follow in that trust and stuff. So with that, because I think it can be kind of confused in the church today where we talk about wisdom. I know like myself, I can tend to look at scripture and be like, I know all this scripture, like I'm growing so awesome. Where do you think Christians today confuse this knowledge with actual like spiritual maturity?
Yeah, definitely to that point of, how much Bible can I quote?
Yeah.
Which it's definitely good to know Bible and to, have it in your heart so you can draw it easily in every life circumstance. But at the same time, that's not necessarily what makes you spiritually mature.
Right.
Right. Spiritual maturity is recognizing your dependence and your need for God, understanding that you're a sinner in need of a savior. Yeah. Right. You need Jesus. And just like we said with Solomon, knowing what to do and actually
doing it. Yeah.
Submitting your life.
That's maturing, right? That's
Right.
where, what's that verse in James where it talks about like, it is through like, we should take joy in trials because it's a testing and improving of our faith. It's the growing of our faith. It's like, you can know, I think about nursing. So like you could be a nurse that knows your book knowledge. You could be a pharmacist that knows your book knowledge. But a lot of patients do not follow the book. Like a lot of them. But you wouldn't really know that until you've like walked through that patient's case and you've studied it and you've trialed and errored medications or therapeutic tactics and stuff. You wouldn't really know that until you've walked through it. And like, it's just cool. We have a God who doesn't just hand us a book and say, memorize it. He's then like, I want you to grow even more spiritually so that you know these words through having lived them and having endured it. Yeah. So
that's a great analogy right there.
I know, right? I use the medical in us. I got you. My brain does not think in literary symbolism sometimes. It just thinks in biology.
I like that.
So my last question for you, just leaving the audience who's listening just with one final thing, is if you could summarize Solomon's life into one warning and then one encouragement for us today, what would that be?
Yeah, I think the warning I would give is Solomon starts off great, right? He understands his role, his need that he wants to create the temple. So it's like he's fully committed to his ministry. Yeah. But then after that, he kind of strays a bit. Yeah. So I think the warning I would give is, let's say you do something big for God and you're kind of on that spiritual high or you have that fire behind you. I think the warning is just kind of be careful in those situations. It's definitely great, but then it's oftentimes after those moments that we kind of deviate. Yeah. I know for me, we went on the G4 retreat, which was amazing.
Hey,
it was shout out to G4 for that. It was amazing. I remember coming back and I was like, man, I need to do this. My spiritual walk needs to look like this. I need to pray more. And that was great for like a week, but then afterwards it was just kind of like I stopped doing those things. Yeah. So for me personally, I've always noticed that whether I'm coming off of a mission trip or a retreat, it's like the moments afterwards are amazing. But then 2-3 weeks later, it looks very different, right? So I think same thing with Solomon. The warning would just be stick to it, you know? Don't just live for the high points and all the things, but just be disciplined and keep at it every single day.
Yeah. Don't let like that slow compromise kind of drift into with everything. Yeah. I love that. I think there's just like an encouragement with the kings and stuff too, is like I don't know, this has been a common theme with like young adults lately. I feel like with my teaching and stuff is like God is growing us. Like that is such an encouragement because you don't have to know everything. You don't have to live life perfectly. We have a God who, like, when we ask for wisdom, he gives wisdom. And so the story about Solomon and the story about the kings wasn't about like so much about them not being perfect as much as it was is like they weren't allowing themselves to be molded by God. And like, I love this verse. I brought it up last Monday. It's like, Isaiah 64, it says, I am the clay, you are the potter. Basically, like my father molded me and shaped me. And like just an encouragement is like, be willing to be molded by God, molded through the wisdom in his words, molded through correction and listening to that correction, and molded through humility, knowing that you don't know all the answers and you don't know what is right and what's wrong. So I always leave you guys with a challenge, something to think about as you're continuing to read through Kings. And I believe we're going to switch into the Chronicles soon. So we're going to go back to the story of it all. Is what area of your life do you need to grow in wisdom? Not just knowing what is right and what's wrong, but wisdom of God, where you need to humble yourself and say, like, God, show me the way. Where do you need to grow in that? And maybe have you seen in your own life how God has used difficulties, temptations to make you a wiser person? How is that encouraging? And again, James 1:5 says, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. I hope this podcast has blessed you guys today. I hope as you're thinking more about the wisdom of God, that you are pointed to Jesus himself, that he is the wisdom of God. We hope you can join us here at Grace. If you're interested in getting involved or getting plugged in, visit our website. There are things from children's ministries to young adults. We have a Christmas party coming up, to so many different areas in caring ministries and outreach and recovery. And we'd love for you to join us. But stay tuned for not next week, but the next week. Our pastors will be back on to talk more about the Bible in a year.